that everybody's here joining us. I just hit the broadcast button, so in case no one was able to hear me before, you can hear me now. So this is Ariel from Retail Control Systems. I'm one of the account managers here, and I'm joined by John Dempsey. He is in our RCS support department. He's one of our subject matter specialists. And I know that's a lot, right, John? I saw that look on your face. So as you all know, because I'm sure this is not your first John Dempsey webinar, John really packs in a lot of information. So I'm going to talk as little as possible and let John take it away. So I just want to tell you pretty briefly what we're going to be talking about. I'll skip through because I've already introduced myself and I've introduced John. And I'll tell you what we're going to be covering. We're going to talk about inventory corrections, inventory freshness, month end, and loss prevention. And of course, we already know this webinar is all about reports. So John will be covering all of the reports, ways to run them, how to use these reports to just be successful in your business. All right, John, are you ready?
I'm ready.
We're ready. I'm ready to stop talking, so take it away, John.
Are you getting my screen now?
I see your screen now.
Okay, good. All right, well, thanks for everybody for attending. As Ariel mentioned, we're going to talk about a lot of inventory reports. I'm probably going to go through about 16 to 18 reports. And I've kind of grouped these reports. I've done report webinars in the past, and we've kind of thrown reports at the wall. And when I was asked to do this webinar, I thought, you know, from a strategy or an approach, I would break the reports down by area of focus. And so the first area of focus I want to talk about are inventory corrections. And the reason I wanted to make this the first element is that, you know, if you can manage your inventory corrections, you will have better inventory available for sale, you will minimize physical count corrections and physical count loss, and you can identify patterns or misbehavior throughout your processes. So the first report I want to take a look at, and it's one that I don't think many people look at frequently, but Counterpoint has had for years, decades, a committed inventory report. And you can access this report off of your inventory menu, and you can also access it off of the inventory screen, so you can look at a specific item's commitments. And the purpose of the committed inventory report is to see items that are committed to various transactions. Some of these are legitimate transactions like pending purchase orders or back orders or special orders, drop ship orders, transfers, and you know, some of those may not be legitimate transactions anymore. And so looking at your committed inventory can show you transactions that may need to be updated, canceled, received. And so when I run the committed inventory report, I can filter this by location, I can filter it by item number range, I can filter it by different types of commitments, so I can just look at transfer commitments. And if I preview the report, it's going to show me by item number, by location, what's committed, what's on purchase order, what's on non-committing transactions, so things like back orders, special orders, drop ship orders, which do not commit inventory, but do put holds on the item itself. And so in addition to seeing the quantities for those various transactions, that actually itemizes and shows the specific documents and what type of documents they are. So when we see vendor orders, that's code for a purchase order. And it shows me that that purchase order dates back to 2017. I'm probably not going to receive that purchase order. So I don't want my staff to assume that I'm still expecting 5 of those to be coming in. So I either want to cancel that purchase order, contact the vendor. If I still need that product, I might need to find an alternate vendor to purchase it from. So scanning through the rest of the report, you'll see back orders, special orders, regular orders. You'll see layaways, you'll see transfers, and it breaks out transfer outs versus transfer ins, which can be committing inventory or showing you an expected item coming in or going out. So this is a report that you'd want to scan through probably on a monthly basis. If you have multiple locations, you might want the store managers to look at it from their store standpoint and just filter it to their store and not worry about the other stores, so they're not looking at as much volume. But the more you look at this report, the shorter the report is going to be. So that's a quick report that I like to look at. This is another report I also tend to look at when I get support calls, where people are questioning the quantities on various documents, or what they're seeing for suggested order quantities. I also often look at this before I recalc item quantities. So I have a list of documents that are committing inventory. Next report I'm going to pull up, also not a commonly run report, kind of gone into the deep freezer for reports on this, but I'm going to take a look at the transfer status report. And you'll notice I'm using the new search function in 8.5, which is really handy to find reports that are buried under multiple submenus. It's a lot faster to search for them than navigate the menu. So the transfer status report shows us reports that we have, or transfers that have not been received yet. Well, I should say it can show us a lot of different things. We can look at transfers that haven't been received. We can look at transfers that have been received, or we might just want to focus on transfers that have been partially received. So on the transfer tab, we can filter based on a transfer status. So our transfer status are complete, reconciled, or open. And so I've got my filter set to not include things that are complete or have been reconciled. So if a transfer has been reconciled, that means it's complete as well. So I'm really just curious to see what I have for open transfers and partially received transfers. And a partially received transfer is still an open transfer. And when a product is on transfer, it's not at the sending location and it's not at the receiving location. So it's not on hand anywhere. And that's why I'd be concerned about that inventory. I probably don't care about serial numbers. So if I preview the report, it's going to break down by transfer number, show me the items that are on that transfer, the status of the individual line items. So I may have items on a transfer that's been partially received that are complete. And it shows me what the original transfer quantity was, how many the receiving location has received in so far, and what the new quantity expected is. And it's that quantity expected that I really care about, because that's product that I've paid for that isn't in a store available for sale. So again, just like the commitments report, I'm concerned with inventory that I've paid for, or I own, or I'm trying to bring in, that I don't have available for sale. And the report totals per transfer, and at the end of the report, it'll give me grand totals of what I have on transfer out and on transfer in. And we can filter this by location. So if we have multiple locations, I can just look at items from my location or to my location. Next thing I'm going to take a look at, and since the beginning of time, this has always been an area of concern for myself and retailers in general, and that's what I call negative on hands. Items where you have a negative on hand means you really either have zero on hand and your inventory is incorrect, or you have a positive quantity on hand and your inventory is still incorrect. So negative on hands devalue your inventory, and they can inflate purchase orders, purchasing advice, transfer advice, and tell you to move product that you need to fill when you really don't need to fill it because you actually already have it. So negative on hands are a real quick indicator of problem areas. And so I found, you can always look for a negative on hand just by filtering your inventory tab, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, but I've always liked the inventory status report for this. There we go. And notice I typed in status and it found inventory status, just like our keyword searches. And so the reason I like the inventory status report for looking at negative on hands is I may have an item where I have a positive quantity on hand, but that item is gridded, and I might have 10 extra larges and -5 mediums. So I really have a negative quantity in a certain cell. And so the inventory status can help me identify items where I have negative on hands at the cell granular level on gridded items. And so when I run the report, I can run this with location detail, and I can sort it by item, by vendor, or by category. So I'll run this group by category with location detail. And usually I want to look at things that are non-zero. When I'm focusing on negative inventory, if the inventory is 0, I don't care about it, which will eliminate a lot of pages of the report. But I also want to consider the cell level quantities so I can identify cells where I'm below 0. And I'm not a big fan of the of the grid reports in Counterpoint. I prefer looking at gridded items in a list view. It allows you to see a little bit more detail. And if your grids are very large in terms of numbers and colors and sizes, it may not fit on a page, whereas the list will just scale down the page. So it's a little bit easier to read. And I'm going to suppress the grid record if the cell quantity is 0, which will again make the report a little bit smaller. When I run the report, I like to see the inventory value and the stock status. So inventory value is going to give me a cost value, and the stock status is going to compare my on-hand quantity against my mins and maxes to show me whether I'm understocked or overstocked or out of stock. And when I run this report, I've already got a preset filter in here, which is what I wanted, which is quantity on hand less than 0. And that's going to help me identify items where I just have negative on hands. And so this is showing me by item and by location and by color and size products where I have negative on hands and what the value of that negative on hand inventory is. And it's going to summarize that by category and then also in grand totals. So I can see I've got negative $134 worth of apparel. I could also filter this to exclude specific categories. So if I want to eliminate my food category, which includes a lot of weird not inventory product, I might customize the filter, and instead of category between, I might change that to category is in, and simplify that back so I can select my apparel category and my golf category, which are the 2 categories I care about.
But you also say category is not.
You could.
Okay.
Yep. But I have 2 categories that I didn't want to include.
Oh, gotcha.
I had a forecast one in there also. And if I'm only concerned with inventory at my specific location, why should I care about another store's inventory? I can filter that by a specific location. So on the inventory tab, I can pick location main or location storage, and just look at the inventory that I'm responsible for. The inventory status report is a little bit of a tricky report in that it can be run lots of different ways. There's a lot of different formatting parameters for it. So it takes a little bit of playing around to get the format the way you want it to include. And one of the things you'll notice is anytime you change how you're running the report, it always likes to jump the additional information back to the last received, sold, and counted. And so those are the dates of the last sale, last receiving, and last physical count. Some people like seeing that information. I prefer seeing the cost valuation numbers. And going back to the reasons why I'd be looking at this, anytime I see an item that's got a negative on-hand quantity, that's an indicator that the item wasn't properly received. So it came in from the vendor or it came in on a transfer, and that document was never received in Counterpoint. And if the document wasn't received in Counterpoint, then I don't just have a problem with this specific item, I have a problem with every single item that was on that document. And so once I can identify the item and what wasn't correctly received, I can go back and correct that document and fix a whole bunch of items all simultaneously. And again, fixing this now will minimize the number of corrections you have to make during your physical inventory. And the bigger the number of corrections you're making during your physical inventory, the more the auditors are going to look at it with a fine-tooth comb. The next thing I want to look at in terms of inventory corrections is, I'm going to kind of go back to my favorite report for this, or one of my top 2 favorites, and that's my merchandise analysis report. I say my merchandise analysis report like I wrote it. But the merchandise analysis report can be run for lots of different purposes. And the purpose I'm going to put together today is for looking at adjustments. And I've got a save parameter for adjustment history. And what I care about in this particular instance is items that have a high track record of inventory adjustments. If I'm doing lots of inventory adjustments on a particular product, there's probably a reason why I'm doing lots of inventory adjustments. Are they being stolen? Am I not receiving them properly? What's going on with the particular product that I have to do a lot of inventory adjustments for? And using the merchandise analysis allows me to really rank my inventory based on the number of adjustments I've done. So when I'm running this report, whenever I run a merchandise analysis, we get to choose whether we want to look at item detail or a group summary. So in this particular case, I'm looking for item detail. And I want to look at all of my inventory, but I really don't want to look at all of my inventory. I want to look at my worst adjusted items per category in this particular scenario. So I'm going to rank all of my inventory, and I'm going to rank them based on the cost value of the adjustments. And I'm going to group my inventory by category. You might group it by subcategory, you might group it by vendor, but in my scenario, I'm going to group it by category. And then per category, I'm going to look at my bottom 10 items. I picked 10 at random. If you want to pick your bottom 15 or your bottom 3, it's just a random number here. But I'm looking at my bottom, which means I'm looking for the items where I've taken the biggest cost adjustment on. And I can specify whatever I want for a time frame, and I'm going to order them by the rank, their ranking number. I can run this for a specific location or all locations. And the way I was able to choose my rank of cost of adjustments is by, on my select columns, having cost of adjustments in as an element to display. So I can rank my inventory based on anything that I've got over on the visible column side. And I can filter this for categories and locations and vendors and subcategories and everything else we would normally do. And if I preview this report, it's going to break down by category. It's going to show me the rank number. And notice, since I'm looking at my bottom items, they're all negative adjustments. If I looked at my top adjustments, they would be all positive adjustments, increases to inventory. And so if I slide down into my golf category, I can see the total for adjustments for golf, total for adjustments for food, total adjustments for apparel, as well as grand totals for the report. And it's going to basically put them in numeric ascending order based on the, or really descending order here, based on the cost value of the adjustments. So this is a quick, easy way to identify items where I'm taking big dollar adjustments over either the course of the year or course of a season, and identify product where I'm making mistakes. And once I identify the products that I'm making mistakes, I've got a better chance of correcting that behavior. Another scenario, and keep in mind, the merchandise analysis report, when it classifies inventory adjustments include bill of material kit assemblies, inventory adjustments, and physical count transactions. So if I want to exclude my physical count transactions, which are going to probably be the bulk of my inventory adjustments, I might, on the inventory tab, customize my filter and add a condition of last count date on or before. So I might use my last count date to exclude items from the report. So I'm really looking at true inventory adjustments as opposed to physical count inventory adjustments. While I'm on that same vein, inventory adjustment, or on the merchandise analysis, adjustments include bill of material adjustments and physical count adjustments. Receivings include quick receivings and returns to vendor. So that number is a net of the receiving transactions, just like the adjustments is the net of all the different inventory adjustment transaction types. Transfers include quick transfers as well as transfer in, transfer out, and transfer reconciliations. I'm going to move on to my next report, and this isn't a report I run a lot, but I think it has some merit and some good information. And that's the inventory aging report. And so at this point, we're kind of moving on to freshness reporting, or looking for inventory that is either fresh or stale. And so we can use this to kind of identify product that needs to be discounted to move out, or maybe product that doesn't need to be discounted because it's turning over with enough frequency. So with the inventory aging report, basically it's like a valuation report, but with 5 different valuation numbers. So if I age my inventory as of today, that means I'm going to get an April 17th inventory, and a March 17th inventory, and a February 17th inventory, going back 5 periods. And we can run this either with item detail, or just as a category summary, or just as a vendor summary. So if I don't want to include my item detail, but I want a quick snapshot of how the store is doing in terms of turning the inventory over, I can preview the report, and it shows me my inventory today, how much of my inventory is over 30 days, over 60 days, over 90 days, and you can see I don't do a lot of transactions in my test company, so all my stuff is over 120 days and collecting dust. If I want to see where that product really resides, I can check the item detail box, and now I can see per item how long that item's been sitting on the shelf collecting dust. If I want to go back further than 120 days, I can change the number of days in each aging period. So I might make it 60 days in period 1, and 120 days in period 2, and 180 days in period 3, and so on and so forth. So I can stretch further back than just a 5-month time window. If I want to run this with location-specific detail, all I have to do is, instead of making it a summary report, I ask for location detail. And again, I can group that by category or by vendor. And then I can choose which location I want to run it for, or if I want to run it for a group of locations, I can do that as well. I can look at my inventory in cost and quantity, or just cost dollars. And I can also run that with, showing it as a percentage of my total. I get the feeling, when I talk to retailers, I find that most of them tend to run their standard reports over and over again and never really dive into the other report choices that they have. And so this is kind of an opportunity to get a sampling of what else is out there. I'm going to go back to my merchandise analysis report and run that in a different way. And so my merchandise analysis, in this particular case, I want to run this to identify either top turners or bottom turners based on turn rate. And again, I've got a save parameter for this, so I don't have to build it on the fly. If I can find it, top turn rate. So again, I'm going to analyze my inventory by items. I'm going to print all of the items. So just like I did with the inventory adjustments, I'm kind of running this with a similar formatting or similar style. I'm also going to group by category, but I could change that to group by vendor or by subcategory. And per category, I'm only going to look for my top 10 items. Or let's reduce that. Let's look for our top 5 items. And I'm ranking my items based on their turn rate. And so on my Select Columns tab, I'm looking at my inventory in this particular case in quantity. So I'm looking at what I have on hand, what I'm expecting to receive on purchase orders. I'm looking for how many I've adjusted, how many I've sold, how many I've received, and what my turn rate is for that product. But what I've done here in quantities, I could do in cost. So I could look at my cost value of what's on hand, or my cost of sales, or my cost of what's on purchase order. Or I could look at my retail value of what's on hand, what's been received, what's sold. And I can filter this by price point, by vendor, by subcategory. I can filter it by location. I can filter it based on items that I currently have on hand. And if I preview the report, it's going to break down by category and show me my top 5 items per category. And notice the turn rate column is shaded because that's where we're ranking. And it's showing me, my top turning item is this ADM TL3 with a turn rate of 1.3. So what do I do with this information? If I'm turning it 1.3 times a year and I only have 1 on hand, I might need to order more of them. I might need to adjust my mins and maxes so I keep more of them on hand to satisfy, the turn rate of, demand. You'll also notice, and again, this is because my data is demo database, but you'll notice I've got turn rates of 0 in here. I might filter this report based on things that I don't have on hand. So going back to the inventory tab, I might want to look for things where I have at least 1 of them on hand, because I'm not going to change things where if I have 0 on hand. So my quantity on hand, instead of being a quantity on hand of equal to something, I might change that to a quantity on hand of at least 1. That's probably not going to change the output at all, but it's probably going to change the rank numbers that it associates with them. I've done this for my top turning items. I might invert this and do it for my bottom turning items. And all I have to do that is change it from my top 5 to my bottom 5. And since I'm looking for items that I have at least something on hand, I can see product that I'm sitting on where my turn rates are in the basement or at 0, and make decisions on how I want to reprice that merchandise to get rid of it to bring in merchandise that will turn for me. So again, I can use merchandise analysis to look for items that I want to bring in more of and items that I want to get rid of. I want to talk about filtering by the inventory tab. And this is an accessible tab really from almost every single inventory, every report that's in the inventory folder. And there are a couple of columns in here that are worth playing around with. So if I customize my filter, in my list of items to filter by, I can look or frequently look for things where I have either negative on-hand quantities or quantities of equal to 0. I may filter based on dates. So last count date, I'm going to slap a couple of them in here and we'll talk about them. Last received date, and last sale date. And with the last received date, I'm going to change that to on or before. And with the last sale date, I'm going to change that to on or after. So what I'm looking for here is I can use my last receiving date and my last sale date to identify product that came in before the beginning of the year and that I've sold recently, or maybe that I haven't sold since it came in. So I might change both of them to be on or before to identify product that came in, before the end of the year and I haven't sold this year. And that would tell me that I've brought the product in and it hasn't been moving. So I've got at least one on hand. I haven't received it this year, and I haven't sold it this year. Now, maybe those are rakes for fall, and I don't really care about that, but if it's product that I expect to sell this season, I'd want to know about that. And I'm doing it here on a merchandise analysis report, but I could do that on any report that it gives me access to the inventory tab. Another thing that I can do on the inventory tab that's worth playing around with is if you have min and max quantities set up, on the inventory tab, we can filter based on a stock status. So I'm going to choose the stock status per quantity on hand. There's also a per quantity available or per net quantity, which would take into account pending orders or layaways or today's sales. But with a stock status, there's actually a typo in here from NCR, or something is incorrect, but stock status compares what our current quantity on hand is versus our min quantity and our max quantity. So if we have 0 on hand, we're out of stock. If we're between our min quantity and our max quantity, we're okay. If we don't have mins and maxes, that's flagged as no information. If we're beneath our min quantity, we're below our minimum. And the mistake that NCR has is above minimum is actually not above minimum. Above minimum is actually above maximum, which means we're overstocked. So we can use this to identify products where we're understocked or products where we're overstocked. So if I grab above minimum, that's going to show me something that I have at least one on hand and I'm above my minimum. And I might also drag in my last sale date to find product that I haven't sold recently where I'm overstocked. And again, you can do this with any report that gives you access to the inventory tab. And while you may not be using mins and maxes for replenishment with purchase orders and transfer advice, you can use that to identify overstocked inventory. I'm going to move on to some month-end reports. Month-end reporting isn't really the most exciting of things, but it's kind of a necessary evil. And if anybody is listening today from the accounting department, I didn't say that. So the first one I'm going to look at is a customer aging report. So the aging report is going to show me per customer how much money each of these customers owe me and how old that money is. So just like the inventory aging report, we get 30, 60, 90. If I want to go more than 4 terms, I can go up to 5, which means I can go up to over 120 days. And I can filter this by customer. And the reason I would want to filter this by customer is if a customer doesn't owe me money, or more importantly, if I owe a customer money, I don't want to see that on the aging report. So I want, balance at least, that's good. I want to only see customers who have a balance of at least $1. So that'll eliminate all the customers who don't owe me money or who have credit balances. And if I preview the report, it's going to give me a document detail, the age of all of those documents, what type of documents they are, how much of that balance is current, how much of it's over a month old, how much of it's several months old that I need to start dialing for dollars with. And then the other reason I really like this report is this should definitely be run before you calculate finance charges or print statements. And the reason for that is this open balance. And the report formatting here is a little bit ugly, but this word open actually goes with this balance, not with the balance over here. But the open balance in this particular case of $728 is on documents, these that are flagged as open. These are credit memos or payments that we've received, or credit memos we put on the customer's account, either through returns or customer adjustments, but haven't applied them to their invoices, which means the invoice where the customer has a balance to pay off an invoice is still sitting as an unpaid invoice, which means when we calculate finance charges, we're going to calculate finance charges on those documents. And we're also going to show the customer that on their statement that those old invoices are still out there and that we haven't applied money that they've sent us. in this particular case, these 2 check payments of $492, and that's going to warrant a phone call from a customer who's upset. So the customer aging report, while it's great to see how old the money is and where you can start making phone calls to start bringing cash in, it also identifies customers where you need to reapply open documents, what those documents are, and looking at the list, you can figure out which invoice to pay, to apply this $100 payment or this $392 payment towards. And then you can go into the account management and reapply and choose the documents you want to reapply. But this kind of itemizes all of those cases, allows you to clean up your customer receivables before you calculate finance charges, or I should say miscalculate finance charges, before you print statements that are going to confuse the customer or make the customers irate because they just sent you a check. And lastly, with this report, this particular customer has documents that are 6,000 days old. You might want to start reevaluating whether you want to give terms to Bill Baker anymore, because he seems like a little bit of a deadbeat. Next report I want to go through really quickly is just an inventory valuation report. And it's always my recommendation that at month end or the first day of the new month, you print a valuation report. When I run the report, I usually look for quantity on hand not equal to 0. So I'm looking for both positive inventory and negative inventory. And this is a pretty straight, easy to read report with what's on hand, what it's worth at an accounting cost, what it's worth at last cost, and what the retail value of that inventory is. And at the bottom of the report, we get our summary total. And while you may not do anything with these numbers, I recommend you export this as a PDF file, save it someplace, and I would probably call this my, April 2019 valuation. And in May, I'll have another one, and that way when the accountant asks for what was your, month-end inventory, I can give him the PDF and he can reconcile that to the inventory account in our accounting software. If you don't run an inventory valuation report, there is a historical valuation report. And when you run the historical valuation report, again, you can run it by item or by category. Make sure you run it for all of your inventory, and you can pick the date that you want to run it for. So if I want to run this for my March 31st inventory, I can run this for a specific location or a group of locations. Check the box to include inactive inventory, meaning if the item doesn't have any inventory history, I still want to include it. And quantity on hand, I probably want to put, I probably want to make that quantity on hand not equal to 0, but if I preview this, what the historical valuation report is doing is it's taking today's inventory and reversing all of the sales, receivings, adjustments, any transactions, transfers, anything that we've done back to March 31st. And so it's calculating and reversing the cost value and the quantity of the transactions to get a March 31st inventory. I think it's always better to look at true inventory numbers than calculated numbers. So the historical valuation is, I would say, the last resort, but it's not as good as a normal valuation report. The other two reports that I don't think a lot of people look at, but in terms of reconciliation are there and worth looking at, are both gift certificates and store credits. So the gift card list and under store credits, the store credit list. They're very similar looking reports, but they'll give you either a detail or a summary list of your outstanding liabilities. And that should be reconciled against your accounting software, gift certificate and store credit liabilities. So it gives you an itemized list of all of the outstanding gift cards or store credits and what the current balance of all of those liabilities are. And I ran this as a summary. If I ran it as a detail, it would show me the issues, the redemptions, voids. But in terms of a reconciliation, usually the summary is sufficient. And the gift card list and the store credit list are almost identical in formatting. So if you can read one, you can read the other. Next report I want to talk about is everyone's least favorite, and that's the tax history report. Counterpoint has a couple of different tax history reports. The one I typically run, and usually I determine which and how we're going to run the tax history report based on what you have to report to the state, how you have to break things out. I like the tax history by tax code over by tax authority. If I run it by tax code, it's still going to show me tax authorities. So tax authorities are jurisdictions like the county or the city or the state. I like running it by tax code, so it summarizes it by my customer tax codes or store tax code. And when I run this, I would normally run this for a period of the month. I might filter it by store if the stores are reporting separately. And when I preview the report, I have a tax code of Memphis in my system. And that Memphis tax code has a city component, a county component, and a state component. And you'll notice that the sales are the same across the board because the transactions all had that common tax code of Memphis, Tennessee. So I've done $1,800 in sales this month with customers that have a tax code of Memphis, Tennessee. And I say customers with a tax code of Memphis, Tennessee. If the customer doesn't have a tax code, then my store has a tax code. The non-taxable amount, this non-taxable column, this is a sum of all of the items that were sold as part of this 1,855 that are flagged as non-taxable. So when we configure items, there's a checkbox that marks whether the item is taxable or not. If that box is unchecked, the sales appear in the non-taxable column as well as the sales column. So the sales column is really the total of sales to customers or transactions that have a tax code of Memphis, Tennessee. The non-taxable would be the items that are flagged as non-taxable. Taxable tax is an unusual scenario, but in some jurisdictions, one jurisdiction will charge sales tax on sales tax collected by another jurisdiction. So the state may charge tax on the county or city tax portion or the other way around. In some jurisdictions, both gift certificates and store value cards, which are gift cards, can be taxed. And those are summed separately because those aren't true line items, they're a different record type. In some jurisdictions, miscellaneous charges like freight are charged. So that's not an item sale, but it's summed in a separate column. So our non-taxable, reading across, it should foot across to our total taxable amount. And then the last two columns, which are kind of confusing at first, the normal tax amount and the total tax amount. You'll notice they say the same thing. They should say the same thing. The normal tax is what the system computed for sales tax. The total tax is what you actually charge the customer in tax. And the reason those would not be the same is if somebody did some type of tax override on the transaction. So Counterpoint in point of sale has a tax override function, or a change tax code function, or a change line taxable status function, or a change line tax category function. And those would all show up as exemptions or exceptions and would lower the total tax amount collected. Anytime those two don't match, you would want to investigate why, but the total tax is what you've withheld in tax, and that's what you should be paying to the state or county. The other thing I don't have in here, just because based on my tax configuration, is within my tax authorities, I may have multiple rules. So if I sell cigarettes and alcohol and clothing and medicine, those might all be taxed at different rates. So medicine might be non-taxable. Liquor and tobacco might be taxed at a higher tax rate. Clothing might be taxed below a certain, if it's over $110 or above $50. So within each tax authority, I may have a breakout based on the tax rules, which are linked to my item tax categories. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about tax when we get into exceptions in a minute or two. I'm going to have to probably speed up the pace here a little bit, but next report I want to look at is my purchase order report. It's not the sexiest of reports, but the reason I look at my purchase order report is I may have lots of old purchase orders in the system, things that I've placed on order that are never coming in. And so I can filter that report based on delivery dates and cancel dates. And so the way I might do that is I might change it to canceled, my cancel date is either empty, or because I never filled it in, or my cancel date is on or before. So I might look at things that I was supposed to cancel at the end of the year, but I haven't yet, or I never filled in the cancel date. And these will show me all of the all of the open purchase orders that are out there that I want to go out and either contact the vendor and find out if they're coming in, or just go into Counterpoint and cancel, assuming that they're not going to arrive. And canceling the purchase order doesn't delete the purchase order. It still keeps it out there so I can copy from it in the future and look at what was originally ordered. But it does update all of the items and reduce the quantity on PO. So if I'm looking at the item, I won't tell the customer that I have some on order and they're due shortly when they're not coming. I want to move over to some loss prevention information. And the first thing I want to look at, and most of these are going to be sales history reports. So the first thing I want to look at are voided tickets. So a voided ticket report is a completed sale that's been voided. So what most people call a post-sale void. And I want to know what was on that transaction, and I really want to know how it was paid for. And so I might run this for a specific date range, the year or the month. I might filter it by user so I can identify trends, and look at totals for post-sale void per user. And the reason I want to know how it was paid for is one of the things I'm looking for are cash sales and potentially store credit sales. So if something was voided that was a Visa or MasterCard, I might be less worried about that than I am with a cash or a store credit, because that might be an indicator of employee theft, where someone's ringing up a cash sale, voiding it and pocketing the money, or ringing up a store credit sale for a return and printing out the store credit slip and keeping it and then voiding it, which would be really a nightmare when that store credit slip comes back. But this will give me totals of how many voids were done, how frequently it's occurring, and what the dollar value is. A post-sale void should be a manager-only function if you're going to allow it at all. A lot of our stores don't. But looking at what the managers are voiding is worth a minute or two on a monthly basis. Next report I want to talk about are price exceptions. Counterpoint has two different price exceptions reports. There's one in point of sale, which looks at today's transactions, and there's one in sales history, which looks at historical transactions and price exceptions. And so when I run the price exceptions report, this is looking for things like price overrides. This is not going to flag things that are sold on sale, whether it be through a discount code or contract, a special price or a promotional price, BOGO price. This is just looking for things where a cashier has overridden the price. And I can filter this by store, by date, by user. And when I preview the report, it's going to give me the actual tickets where it occurred, what the item was, what the normal price would have been, and what the cashier actually charged the customer. So that normal price does take into account discount codes, price promotions, contract prices, and special prices or BOGO deals. So it's the calculated price that the register normally would have charged for that product, and the extended price and the price column indicate what the cashier actually sold it for. Shows you what the difference is, shows you the percentage difference. So scanning through the percentages, that 40% jumps right out at me. The 12%, the 20%, those look like normal price overrides. And when I run the report, if I want, I can get store totals, I can get drawer totals, I can get report totals. So I can look at the total value of those price overrides. And again, just like with my void ticket report, I can filter this by user to look for how much price overrides did a specific user create. So I can filter it by user ID. Next report I want to move on to is the tax exceptions report. And exceptions report, I can't say that word. I feel like saying kafefi or something. So when I run the tax exceptions report, what I'm looking for, I want to see all 4 of the tax exception types. And I probably want to filter this for a time frame. And it's going to break down by exception, or by override type. So where somebody did a raw tax override and changed the tax calculated amount to a specific amount. That might be done for a teacher who has a tax exempt certificate, which is the case here. We changed the tax from 720 to 0. Where somebody changed the tax code on a transaction, maybe changing it from Memphis to out of state or tax exempt. Where somebody changed a line tax or a line tax category. So the line tax override is where somebody flagged the item as non-taxable or changed a non-taxable item to taxable. And the tax category change is where someone changed the tax category from alcohol to clothing, where it's taxed at a different rate. And it's the last 2 that probably concern me the most. And the reason those concern me the most is that if an item is incorrectly configured, the fact that a cashier caught it once usually indicates that lots of other cashiers didn't catch that it was sold with the wrong sales tax. And if the state catches that you sold things at the wrong sales tax, they're going to want to know every instance where that occurred if you're ever audited. Next report I want to look at real quick is a returns report. And there's a couple different ways of doing returns report. And this is kind of a conversation I had the other day with somebody. Returns report. There we go. So a return report, I probably want to see the item detail of what was returned. I want to see it based on a date range, and I want to show how those returns were paid for. Obviously, returns are a great way of employee theft, where merchandise is stolen on the way to the counter and returned for credit or for cash. So this is going to show me what items were returned and how the payout was done, whether we issued store credit, whether we paid out cash, and what the products were. We can filter this by date. We can filter this by user to really hone in on where returns are being done. And the conversation I had that was kind of interesting this week with a particular customer was they wanted to know not just returns, but exchanges and kind of differentiate between the 2. So I'm going to customize my ticket history filter and point out 2 different things that I can filter on. And so I've got 2 columns in my ticket history tab. There's a sale lines and a return lines. So we can isolate transactions that were exchanges from transactions that were return onlys. So the way I can identify a transaction where somebody did some form of an exchange, they returned something and they bought something. I can look for documents where the return is at least 1 and the sale is at least 1. Or I could look for return-only transactions where the sale lines is equal to 0 and the return lines is at least 1. And then I can use that to isolate either return-only tickets or exchange tickets. And I'd probably be less concerned with the exchange tickets than I am with the return-only tickets. Got 2 more I want to cover real quick. Sales of discount items. I'm going to use this with my sales analysis by group report, which I've managed to stay away from so far. And so when I run the sales analysis by group report, what I'm looking for is I want to group this by ticket history user. I'm sorry, right? By user. I'll run this for any date range that I want to run this for. I can run it for a specific store or all stores. But what I'm going to do, or what I'm concerned about from a loss prevention standpoint, is use of coupon codes. Because if I already have promotions going on, using discount codes allows users to double discount, which I may not want to happen, and I want to be aware of how frequently it's happening. So on the ticket history line tab, I'm going to filter this by item type. And what I'm looking for are discount type items. And I'm probably looking for sales and quantity sold, maybe cost of goods, things like that. So if I preview this, I don't have any discount codes in the system, but it's going to break down by user the number and the sales dollars for discount type items, which will show per user how frequently and how much money each user gave up in discount codes, which I might want to be aware of. And the last report I want to talk about is the exceptions and stats report. And I'm not sure why they place this under point of sale, because it's really a sales history report. But the point of sale exceptions report is built on data aggregation. So you have to have data aggregation running, and you have to include transaction logging in your data aggregation to get information in here. But you can run this for whatever time frame you want, and you can pick and choose what kind of behavior you want to look at. So when I run this report, things that I might care about are things like voids, returns, the value of the returns, price overrides, the value of those price overrides. I want to look at completed ticket voids. So a void would be a current ticket void and versus a completed ticket void. And I might want to put my two void numbers right next to each other. And the other thing I usually like to do when I run this report is I like to see the number of tickets. There we have it, return lines. Which I'm not seeing there for some reason. But when I run this report, it's giving me count or dollar values per user, grouped by store, for what I would call questionable behavior. And this should be certainly a report that's being run on a weekly basis, or on at least a monthly basis, to look for trends of, lots of returns, lots of voids, lots of completed ticket voids. This may be, employee theft. It may indicate just a lack of training that you can follow up on to eliminate, and certainly people that you should be watching. So those are the reports I wanted to go through, and it's 2:59. I timed that pretty well.
Oh my gosh, you did great, John. I was just sitting here just worried that we were going to go over, and you did great.
I haven't breathed, taken a breath.
I noticed that you're not really breathing. So we have a few questions in our Q&A manager that I want to be able to get to. So we'll take a few minutes. Anyone that has to leave, we totally understand. The webinar is set for an hour. Of course, we're going to go on a little bit longer while we have everybody's captive attention that's able to stay. If you're not able to stay, the recording will be on the RCS customer portal. So I would encourage you, once that's loaded, you can jump in, you can skip to the end and listen to the Q&A session if you're not able to stay with us for right now. Okay, so the first question I have is from Rochelle. Would the inventory aging report also give the accountant, and that's in quotes, a look at a point in time for an accurate valuation?
Yes, I would probably use the historical valuation report over the inventory aging report for that, because it's easier to pick your date and time. But if you use the inventory aging report, you can set the number of days in each period. So if I go back to that aging report, and I'm not going to run it, but there you go.
And while John's doing this, if there are any additional questions, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box right now, and we'll try to get to everybody's questions. And if it's something we're not able to get to today, then we will follow up with you after the webinar. We also have a handout that John made that goes through step-by-step all of the reports that he's covered today that we will be emailing out to everybody after this webinar is over.
So don't say I didn't give you anything.
That's right.
So going back to Rochelle's question in Jamestown, so if I wanted the inventory 45 days prior to April 17th, I could put in 45 in period 1, and it would calculate inventory back to 45 days ago. But it's probably easier to use the historical valuation report to calculate back to a specific date and time than figuring out how many days are between now and February 23rd.
Got it. Okay, so you can use inventory aging report, but the
historical valuation
easier. Be easier for you to run. We have a question from Tia. Let's see, where did it go? I lost it. If you set a cancel date on a PO, and so this is a little farther back, if you set a cancel date on a PO, will Counterpoint automatically cancel the open lines once that date occurs?
It does not. It doesn't do anything with cancel dates or delivery dates. Those are really purely for reference, but it's easy to filter your open PO report based on delivery dates and cancel dates to find orders that haven't come in that you would hope would have come in by now.
Okay. So if there's a cancel date, you can filter based on cancel date is before X date and then manually cancel also.
Correct.
Okay, great.
To actually cancel them, you have to go into the shopping cart, into purchasing, to purchase orders, and go to cancel purchase orders, call up the document you want to get rid of, and click the cancel PO button.
Okay.
Counterpoint will not automatically cancel them the next day.
Okay. We have a question from Rachel. How can we look up a history of a SKU's prices? For example, if SKU A is sold at a normal price, sold as a sale item, then back to normal, then back to sale price, but at a different discount, they would like to be able to take a look at the price history for that SKU. Is that possible?
Well, you could filter ticket history and see all of the sales for a specific item. So on the point of sale reports, if I go to history and I run a ticket history report, I can filter this by store. I can filter this by date range. And on the item tab, I could look for a specific item number that I'm interested in. And it would show me all of the sales of that item and what the actual prices of each sale were for. So I could look at, and it would be sorted by ticket number, so it would be chronological by location. So I could see the history of different price points. Not the easiest report to read. I might run a query on the table, on the ticket history table, the table that this report is based at, to see in a more of a columnar format all the different price points.
All right, Rachel, I hope that answers your question. And if you don't have a SQL expert on staff there, that is something that RCS support can help you with. Okay. We have 2 more questions, so if you have questions, start typing them in. This is from Aubrey. What report should be used to get beginning inventory?
Historical valuation would give you a beginning inventory, so based on whatever date you ask for. So if you want a beginning of year, beginning of month, historical valuation would give you that. The other report that I might use for that would be the retail value report. The retail value report really is the merchandise analysis report with a canned output format. So the beginning inventory would be the from date inventory, and the ending inventory would be the April 17th inventory. But if I wanted to, I could make that 03/31/19, and I can filter it by item and location, or run it for all my locations or a specific location. But that's going to give me my beginning inventory as of January 1st, because that's the date I put in, and the ending inventory is the March 31st inventory. So the retail value report would give me not just a beginning and an ending inventory, but how I got from the beginning to the ending, based on receivings and adjustments.
All right, great. Thanks, John. We have one more question. This is from Kimberly. Can you do an inventory search by bin, basically by bin 1, bin 2, etc.?
You can. I'm always cautious when I search by bin. So, any report that's going to have an inventory tab will allow you to filter by bin. So here's that inventory status that we were playing with earlier. If I customize this for bin 1, contains, and then I could put in, you know, the bin number where that product is located. The concern I have with that is there's usually find products that don't have bins coded to them. And since bin is an optional column, it's often null or empty. So usually what I do is I add a second condition on bin 1 where bin 1 is empty. And so I'm looking for bin 1 is X25 or bin 1 is empty. I'm just going to type in X25 as my made-up bin number. And so I have a condition on quantity on hand less than 0 already, or quantity on hand more than, and I want to look at bin 1 contains X25 or bin 1 is empty kind of separately. So I'm going to indent both of those. And what that does from a SQL standpoint, or kind of algebra, is it puts an opening parenthesis before bin 1 contains and a closing parenthesis after bin 1 is empty. So it's going to find everything where quantity is less than 0 and either is supposed to be in bin X25 or it doesn't have a bin. Comparing things that have values and have no values can give you some strange behavior. So I usually handle the empty condition as well.
Okay, awesome. Rochelle has another great question. What is the best report to utilize to reconcile the daily revenue to the cash credit card deposits that will also show the cost of goods sold by category?
Cost of goods by category. I mean, I'd run a ticket history to see cost of goods and sales and a pay code recap for cash, MasterCard, Visa, your card brands and store credits, but that's not going to give you a cost of goods by category. Your pay code information isn't tied out on any standard report to a category summary. I have modified the drawer summary report to include an item category total. The only report I can really think of that would give you that would be the Z-tape, one of my least favorite reports.
I cringe when anyone says Z-tape.
But the Z-tape report will give you, a store summary of cash and credit card and MasterCard and stuff like that, but it can also produce sales by either category or sales by subcategory. So, and you can run that for a specific date or range of dates, and that would tie your sales and cost of goods, although I'd have to look and see if that includes cost of goods or just sales by category. I think it may just be sales and quantity sold by category, not the cost of goods by category.
Okay. And the Z-tape is that one of those reports that's not customizable? I know there's something there that you can't really change.
No, I've modified the Z-tape. One of the frequent things I do on the Z-tape is I chop out all of those, by tax code chunks, and the more sub-reports you chop out of the report, the faster it is. So that's something that
We like fast reports.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That has been all of our questions. So I'll give a couple more minutes to type in any last questions. If anyone thinks of something that they did not have an opportunity to ask during this time, please reach out to your account manager. That would be either Darlene, it would be Patrick, or myself, Ariel. And I also had a couple of announcements I wanted to share with everybody. We're going on the road. We have a really cool event coming up in Ohio on, I believe it's May 8th. It's posted on the RCS website. It's an event that you can register for. It's a full day of training at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It includes all your meals for the day and a free tour of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and tons of training, just a full day packed with training, more on reports. I don't think John Dempsey's going to be there, but Diane will be there. She's another one of our senior subject matter specialists. And then on the topic of senior subject matter specialists, I know that it's hard to get enough time with these top dogs here with RCS support, but they can.
I don't think Diane wants to be called a dog.
A top dog, but they can come to you. We have several of these very expert, knowledgeable counterpoint support technicians that are now specialists in what they do. They've been doing this for so long, and the goal is for them to be able to help you harness the power of Counterpoint to make your business more successful. And they love traveling to see you and be with your team and show you how to use Counterpoint in a way that's really just going to be a game changer for you. It's going to increase your bottom line, show you how to grow if that's your goal. But basically, Counterpoint is a really powerful tool that can help you achieve your goals. So whatever they are, if you share those with us, have John or Diane or Karen go on site with you, you will just be blown away at what they can help you do with Counterpoint. So if you have questions about booking time for one of our subject matter specialists to go on site with you, reach out to your account manager. We're happy to get you more information on what that looks like and send them your way. So I do see one more question. I'm going to take a look at this real quick.
Going back to Rochelle's question, that Z-tape did not show cost of goods. It showed the sales dollars.
Z-tape does not show cost of goods, shows the sales dollars. Okay. Did I say there was a training seminar coming up? Yes, I did. This is from an anonymous attendee, but we do have, so initially we set up this roadshow for the Goodwill industry specifically, because we have a number of customers that are Goodwill organizations, but we decided that we wanted to share the love and open it up to everybody. So if you're in the Ohio area, it makes sense for you, check out the details online under our upcoming events section of our website. It has the date, the time, the cost of registration, and all the good details, and a full agenda, so you can really see what you'll be learning. It's going to be a really great event. Darlene McQueen and Diane Dupree are putting that on, and I'm sad that I won't be there. All right, I think that's it. That's all the questions we have. If there's anything you think of later on, feel free to reach out to your account manager, or if it's a support question, reach out to RCS support. You can open a case by emailing, by calling, or by going onto the RCS customer portal and creating a case there. And that's all we have for today. I'm so thankful that you all took the time to join us, and check out our website for more upcoming webinars to register for, and we'll see you again soon. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.